This is what solar generation looked like on my 13 kilowatt solar array so far in the month of March. Note these spikes right here. Um, these are significant drops in power that are linked directly to, in this case, just clouds flying by. An otherwise good day. You can see there's a nice almost 11 kilowatt peak here, but clouds rolling by basically render this this array pretty much useless. And for a fairly decent period of time, we're looking at 11:40 in the morning to just 12:30. So call that an hour. So that's a just generalizing. That's a 1 hour massive drop. So obviously this requires 100% backup power from some source. In this case, it's the grid, but the grid could be powered by wind. It could be powered by any other reliable power source. The key message here is solar requires 100% external reliable backup because of these things. So let's keep looking. So this is just first day in March, and I'm picking March just because it's convenient right now. But I could go back months, and you'd see very similar behavior. So this is what I'm going to call a perfect day, an ideal day looks like. Really nice, smooth generation, decent peak, 9 kilowatts. You never really get the rated label value of the array. In this case, 13 kilowatts. You really never get there for a lot of reasons. A simple example is solar panels have a negative temperature coefficient. So as temperature goes up, you produce less power, and then dirt and so on and so forth. But this is what I'm going to call a perfect day looks like. It's roughly an inverted parabola, which means if you integrate this over time, that what you learn is that this is 66% of the constant power enclosing rectangle. So if the peak here is say 9 kilowatts, if we had 9 kilowatts flat across the board from let's call it 6:40 in the morning until 5:25 in this case, it looks like, in the evening, that would be the constant power rectangle, meaning you've got 9 kilowatts available anytime within those, I'll call it roughly 12 hours. And the actual generation of a solar array is about 66% of the power of the energy of that. And so if you wanted to, using batteries, fill in that rectangle, then you would have to overbuild your solar array by the inverse of the integral of this curve, which is roughly 1.5 times. In other words, I would have to add about 6 kilowatts to my array, get it up to about 20 kilowatts of output, and then batteries obviously, and that would allow for this to be constant power to fill it. Why would you need constant power? Well, let's say that you've got electric cars, right? And you need that power to be that energy to be able to charge your cars. So you in that case you'd need a lot more than 1.5 times this. But as an example, constant power has its uses. If you live in a hot area, you need to run air conditioning. You might be running an air conditioner. A 5-ton air conditioner will consume about 5 kilowatts. And if you live in a hot area, that compressor could be running all day long. A fan and a heat exchanger or the air handler in a 5-ton air conditioning system can easily run about 800 watts. And if it runs 10, 12 hours a day, in some cases you might run it 20 hours a day, if not 24 hours a day. There are use cases for that. One of them being circulating air if you have a 2-story house, because the upstairs gets too hot. So you just run it to circulate air constantly. Well, that's 800 watts constant power. So don't underestimate the need for constant power even in a household environment. Okay, let's go to the next day. Little dip there. Cloud, more than likely, something like that. Okay, this was a nice day. So this is probably rain. I don't remember, but I've seen these patterns before. This day, if we look back, it probably rained in Los Angeles. Let's see. Let's keep going, and you can see how dramatic this is. The peaks are roughly where they were for a decent day, but look at this. I mean, you're making no power. Again, I'll stress, you need 100% backup for solar. And the argument of let's just add batteries doesn't hold, because if you've got a few days like this, you just can't charge your batteries. So you have to double, triple, quadruple your solar array so that on an ugly day like this, you might be able to charge batteries enough to fill this in for the next day. Well, what happens if you have 5 days like this, 10 days like this? We've had that. And so now you need a massive array and a massive number of batteries just to be able to survive 10 days. External reliable backup up to 100% of your required capacity is a necessity when it comes to solar. I don't care what generates that backup, you've got to have it. And the grid generally takes care of that for most of us. Let's see. Sometimes it takes a second for the inverter to send the data. There you go. So so here we go. You know, we've got decent. This is probably a decent day. Probably didn't rain, but you can see clouds rolling by. It rained the day before, so it's reasonable to assume that we had lots of clouds going by. And you can see, you know, you got a pretty decent peak here, just after noon. But you're dropping more than 50%. Variable times throughout the day. Okay, let's see. Did we get another nice day? Same thing. Nice peaks. This is a good time of the year for solar generation. March and April are good times because it's cool enough that the negative temperature coefficient doesn't kill your power generation. In the summer, when it's really hot, you can suffer because of that. This is just clouds. Maybe there was sporadic rain. I don't think so. Just judging from knowing. Okay, perfect day again, right? Nice 9 kilowatt-ish peak. So if you had, say, double that capacity, maybe you could have charged the battery pack to then use in this day during this hour or so. Where power generation went from 8.6 kilowatts down to like 1.5 kilowatts. This is all cloud action, all of it. 10 kilowatt peak, nice. But look at these holes, right? Now imagine if this was a large array powering a city, right? Or a town, a small town. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. This is okay, so looked pretty good. It turned ugly towards the end of the day, so a few dips, but for the most part it looked all right. It looks all right for this day. The 10th, I'm going to cover about 2 weeks. Okay, so there you go. Really ugly day. Rain again. So 5 kilowatts, very sporadically, 4.5, whatever. This is just this is ugly, and this is what can happen with rain. Once again, imagine this sort of an effect over a much larger array providing power for a city or a town. And don't think that, well, it's a larger array, so it's not going to be as dramatic. Well, we these rains that we've been having have covered really wide areas, and the clouds fly around and remain up there for quite some time, covering large areas. So yes, this can happen to a large array. And once again, if you do the math, you look at this. If the answer is, oh, I'll just have batteries, you really need to stop and play around with some numbers to understand that you need to grotesquely overbuild your array and grotesquely overbuild the battery packs that you're going to have to be able to survive multiple days of having this sort of thing happen. Because when this happens during this day, you don't have excess solar energy to charge batteries, because you're basically gasping for air just to power your home and whatever systems you might have. If this is a business, if this is a town, you've got no excess inventory here to go and store into batteries. So the batteries are being drained, and those batteries may have been charged 5-6 days ago because you've had a few bad days. So the batteries need to be much larger to be able to survive these storms and weather. And the solar array has to be much larger to be able to simultaneously power the town or the home and also charge the batteries. You almost have to duplicate it or whatever. There are numbers, and it depends on where the region, right? So let's see. Another pretty funny day. This may have been a combination of showers and cloud action. I don't remember what this day looked like. I need to correlate, maybe do a video where I show the weather and these curves at the same time. So this is let's call it a decent day, pretty decent peak. Probably one nasty cloud in a few here that went through, but for the most part not ugly. Again, if your intent is to charge batteries, if this supplies your load, you need to have a duplicate of this just to charge the batteries so that you can survive whatever might happen in the coming days. This is the 13th, so probably likely clouds. This was the 14th. Now I'm recording this on the 15th. So this was yesterday. It rained quite a bit, and you can tell because the peak was only 2.7 kilowatts. Again, you're draining batteries all day, batteries that you charged during the last X days, and you had a bunch of days that were really bad. So you got to overbuild, and you have to have 100% external backup from the grid, and the grid can provide that power from anything from 1,000 people pedaling power generating bicycles, often some gym, to nuclear power plants and gas fired plants, coal plants, wind, whatever. The point is solar needs backup, lots of it. And this is so far today. It's raining, and you can see that 2 point some kilowatts peak so far. Yeah, it rained all night, so I think it's going to rain most of the day. This probably isn't going to be a pretty picture. So yeah, now if I look at monthly data, give it a second to load. This will show energy production. Now month of February. Let's see if it can load it. Sometimes the inverters can be temperamental. So February was we had a few bad days. Let's see what January looks like. January was really ugly. Yeah, there you go. Look at this. So the beginning of the year was really, really troublesome, with some really ugly days when it just made nothing. This is worthless. So to the point, imagine you need batteries or external backup, but let's just talk about batteries. If you needed batteries to fill in all of these days, right? Those batteries require at least these many days to charge. And if they need at least these many days, and you need quite a bit, you need this much energy. Just the difference between this and set a flat line that was, let's say, up around 50 kilowatt hours or something like that, right? So you need whatever that math turns out to be. You need whatever this bar is, 50 kilowatts minus that, kilowatt hours minus that. You add all of that up. That's how much capacity you need to be able to survive this period of time, which is basically half the month. So half the month, you need a whole bunch of energy that you're not going to be able to replenish into your batteries. If we're assuming we're talking about a scenario where all you have is solar, right? There's no backup, external backup. There's no grid. You're just purely relying on solar. You need a massive, massive amount of battery capacity to be able to survive 15 days of rain in this case, and then the few sporadic days of clouds and whatever. Now, if we go back to December, let's say, okay, no problem. Well, I charged in December. No, you can't charge in December. Look at what happened in December, right? So you would have to have, how would you charge these batteries in December? Well, you have to have probably 2 to 3 times the size of solar array so that you have so much excess energy the prior month to then be able to top off the batteries, and then when you come into January, now you can fill this chart with energy coming from your batteries. And so you have to have a massively overbuilt battery pack system, and then you have to have a doubled or tripled solar array just to be able to charge the batteries to be able to deal with what might come, right? Let's look at November. I don't remember. November, all right, it was all right. A few bad days. This is probably just the inverter being temperamental. Sometimes the SMA, oh, there you go. Grab the data. So October, November, this looked fine. So, if you're going to be intelligent about weather patterns and things like that, you might be able to reduce the overbuild size of the array so that you can charge. Let's say that you make the assumption that, okay, you might have 3 months that are reasonable, and so I overbuild about, let's say, 1.5 times, and I have enough batteries to survive 15 days, right? So during 3 months, my excess solar can charge the batteries, and then when I run into this in January, I can drain my batteries, and I'm good. And then I have to obviously recharge them to be able to survive what might come. This is so far what we've seen in March. It'll probably be the trend will probably continue for the rest of March, is my guess. So the message is, you need lots of batteries. You need a lot of storage if you're going to be reliant on that storage locally at your home or, say, your town to be able to survive. You extrapolate this to a town, right? Or to, forget a town, of a 10, 20, 30, 50-story building wanting to be solely powered by solar, right? You have a couple of weeks of this and you're toast. And you might not have enough space on your roof for the amount of solar you need to service the battery packs you need to be able to mitigate this. So external, reliable, with an emphasis on reliable energy that can provide up to 100% of the energy needs is a requirement for solar. Look at this right here, right? That's, you don't design for this day. You don't design for the day when you're making, in this case, 50 kilowatt hours. You don't design your system, your backup, for that. You don't even design it for this. You have to design it for critical days like these, where you generate very little power. Because if you design for this day, when you're operating at 60% power, then what happens on this day? Your hospitals go dark, right? Half your building needs to be turned off. Half your town needs to be turned off. So you have to design for the extremes. And now there's statistical analysis you can do to try to understand what's reasonable and how to mitigate for the fact that, or how to deal with the fact that you're unlikely to have zero generation days, depending on where you live. If you live near the equator, for example, places like Singapore, it might rain like crazy for 2-3 weeks, for a month, and so the whole month would look like this bar right here or less. And so now you've got to have enough storage. You're going to have so much storage that it's basically undoable. And so at that point, you need 100%, up to 100%, not always 100%, but up to 100% backup from an external reliable power source, which could be any energy or power generation technology out there, from solar 1,000 miles away, because that's a thing, to wind, to the traditional burning fuels, and nuclear. So the message is solar really cannot exist without reliable backup, which includes local battery backup, if you will. And the simplest proof of it is what happens at night, right? So you need 100% backup for your nights, whether that's enough batteries to survive the night, which basically means you take the energy from a perfect day, the energy you need for perfect daytime, and you need that much in batteries just to last the night. And if you want to last several days, because you've got rain and weather, then you need a lot more than that. So solar requires 100% backup half the day during the night. That's a given. That's not disputable at all. So it's a technology that needs to be understood. It doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean that that we shouldn't deploy solar. Obviously, there's huge advantages to solar. And it's a good technology. It's just that we need to talk about the truth, the realities of solar that are shown in this working system, where you can see that there are challenges, and you can see that solar by itself, just an array of solar panels, is not a reliable technology. And it needs to be supplemented by a whole bunch of other technologies. And so there is a legitimate question, which is, well, if it's not this reliable, if it's not usable by itself, why solar? And this is a fair point. There have been studies that show that wind, with a very nominal amount of storage, somewhere around 3 hours per day of storage, can be up to 95% reliable, meaning that only 5% of the time you need external backup, right? 100% backup, right? So solar alone at best is about 70%. So solar with batteries, you're looking at about potentially 70% reliability factor. 30% of the time you're going dark, without an external backup source. With wind plus 3 hours of storage, 3 hours of batteries gets you to 95%. And this is a generalization. There's places on the planet where wind isn't really all that good. But generalizing, if I'm allowed to do that, it looks like there is an argument to be had that says that wind plus some very nominal amount of storage is far better, or could be far better, than solar with lots of storage. And wind isn't affected by rain, for example, and clouds and that sort of thing. It's affected by other things. So my message is very simple. We have to keep an open mind. We have to really talk about science and engineering facts, as opposed to idealized forms of or concepts surrounding these alternative energy and renewable energy sources. Because if we idealize them, then we make the mistake of assuming that they're perfect, and they are far from perfect. And so the challenge, the question is, how do we produce, how do we re-engineer our power systems to have as close to 100% reliability so that we don't go dark, and clean up the environment, and reduce carbon emissions and so on and so forth. All things we all want, right? I happen to think that nuclear has to be on the table, and what I learned about wind makes me believe that wind should likely be at scale, not on top of homes, obviously, but at scale, at grid scale. It's starting to sound to me, it's starting to sound like wind is a far better option than solar. But I haven't done enough research to really be able to set my foot down and say, no, no, this is true, right? So it looks like it is, but again, I need to do more work on this to truly understand it. At this point in time, to me, it looks like wind at scale, at grid scale, to power a city, to power a town, to power a large area. Wind with a nominal amount of storage seems to be a far better idea than solar, on many fronts, including things like potentially maintenance. And if I'm going to extrapolate things like, well, the entire supply chain for a solar system is pretty much coming out of China, whereas I believe that the supply chain for the components and the systems needed to build wind might be more diverse, and places like the U.S. and Europe and other parts of the world might be able to handle wind without so much dependency on China. And one aspect of this dependency that is rarely spoken of is the fact that the maintenance of these systems, solar in particular, will forever depend on China. In other words, the supply chain is there unless we um, inshore it, which might not be as easy to do unless there's real commitment on the part of the U.S. and Europe. The entire supply chain for solar is China, and which means that if we build just astronomically, massively large amounts of solar, which is what we would need to power our country, our cities, our states, our buildings, 100% of that maintenance, 100% of everything we're going to need to do with these massive arrays will forever link us to China. We will forever we'll create a dependency on China for absolutely everything beyond where we are now, which is almost anything you buy at the hardware store and at the food store, and to run our hospitals and companies and whatever you care to name. Almost everything comes from China, and now we're going to also hand over our energy systems to China. I don't think that's a wise idea. That's why I think that wind and probably a reasonable expansion of nuclear might be good ideas. I hope that wind is the better idea, because we all know that nuclear might have issues. I like nuclear, but carefully. Wind looks like could be a really smart choice, far better than solar, to be determined.